There is nothing more dangerous in any war than failing to have imagination on what the enemy might be planning and thinking. It's becoming apparent yet again that ISIS has a better imagination than the Obama administration. Speaking of the president, he is determined to push his version of global trade come hell or high water, and also at the expense of your paycheck, something he seems to be keeping under wraps. And you can bet there already is a working script running around Hollywood seeking to make a movie out of the prison break in upstate New York. Wonder who's going to play the female lead. Break from the ordinary. There's more to news than just a pretty face. I'm Ed Berliner. This is The Hardline for Tuesday, April 9th, 2015.
Nobody suggests that somehow our healthcare system is perfect as a consequence of the law being passed. But it is serving so many more people so much better. And we're not going to go backwards. There's something, I have to say, just deeply cynical about the ceaseless, endless, partisan attempts to roll back progress.
These are two extremely dangerous men, and I go to bed with my doors locked, which I never used to. I have had a pistol permit for 35 years, and I certainly have it with me at home.
Our audit results show that TSA faces significant challenges in contracting for goods and services. Despite spending billions on aviation security technology, our testing of certain systems has revealed no resulting improvement.
Apparently the Capitol Police is clearing this. Okay, we're clearing the floor, so.
We need to evacuate the press briefing.
Where we've trained Iraqi forces directly and equipped them, and we have a train and assist posture, they operate effectively. Where we haven't, morale, lack of equipment, et cetera, may undermine the effectiveness of Iraqi security forces. So we want to get more Iraqi security forces trained, fresh, well-equipped, and focused.
We're learning plenty from the hard drives, papers, and human intel we're gathering around ISIS. But we're not learning fast enough. It's obvious we still lack the imagination to get into the head of the terrorists. And the president's recent verbal faltering about strategy, or a lack thereof, drives home another part of the American problem. How do we expect the Iraqis to kill anyone if we're not giving them the bullets they need to get the job done? All right, gear up. He's the senior political scientist at the RAND Corporation with deep experience in Department of Defense policymaking. Welcome Rick Brennan back to the Hardline. Rick, it's a pleasure to talk to you again, but unfortunately we have to do it by talking about ISIS once again on the offensive. They have staged attacks near Baghdad, the Libyan city of Sirte. They are right back on the offensive less than 24 hours after the president says we really don't have a strategy. Rick, honestly, is it that simple? We don't have a strategy, or is the president playing us for fools?
I think it's more than we don't have a strategy. I think there's a policy resource mismatch that's taking place right now. The president has decided that as a policy goal that he's going to degrade and defeat this organization called ISIS, yet he's only willing to allow, on a policy perspective, 3,000 American troops on the ground to advise and train and assist. He has very restrictive rules of engagement for the utilization of U.S. aircraft. So what you've got at the end of the day is no possibility of having a strategy that could effectively achieve the ends because he's unwilling to provide sufficient resources.
In light of what has happened here, the American-led air campaign has been months-long in Syria and Iraq. We still do not have the ground forces. Is it fair to say the word that was used by the New York Times was feebleness of the administration? Is that just the right word to use here?
I think there are a lot of words that this is an inadequate response or inappropriate capabilities. I mean, go back to 2011 for 1 second when at that point, General Austin, as the commander of the United States Forces Iraq, General Maddox, who was the commander of CENTCOM, and Admiral Mullen, as the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, provided a letter to the White House indicating that unless you kept 10,000 to 14,000 troops on the ground to advise, train, and assist, to assist in maintenance, to assist in logistics, to provide air support, to provide enhanced counterterrorism missions, that you would take a high risk of policy failure. And that advice was ignored by the administration. Yes, that's what you needed in 2011. those very same capabilities are needed today, and yet we're coming nowhere close to providing the military the approval to let them do the types of things that are necessary to see success.
Rick, let's cut through some of the chaff here. Lindsey Graham basically was indicating in the last week that we cannot succeed in the Middle East unless we are there. Basically saying we have to be at war for a long period of time. If you don't want to be at war, don't vote for me. Is he on to something here, though, with the absolute powder keg that the Middle East is really the only answer? We have to be there one way or another, like we were in Korea, like we were in other countries, that we've just got to have a constant presence there from now until God knows when.
We've been there since 1979 in various forms, actually before that. I think Senator Graham is absolutely right at this point. We've got to show leadership in that region if you're going to see any type of progress. You can't show leadership without being there and being present. It doesn't mean that we need to see the 20 or 30, 50,000 troops that we had in the past, but you have to have some skin in the game. And without troops on the ground, on the front lines, assisting the Iraqi forces, and again, small numbers.
That's a permanent force, Rick. Let's be honest here. Let's tell people the truth. That is a permanent force in the Middle East, in Syria, Iraq, wherever you want to call it. But we're going to have to put troops there. We're going to have to actually get ourselves to the point to realize that they are always going to be there from now until whenever it's necessary.
I think that's right. But I think it's important that you start off with saying, do we believe that ISIS is a growing strategic threat, not only in the region, but in North Africa, in Asia, and eventually to the United States and Europe? And if we believe that to be true, then you need to put resources on the ground and to put your head in the sand and say, I know this threat's out there, but I'm unwilling to provide the resources because I don't want to be at war. Well, nobody wants to be at war, not the least of which is the U.S. military. But we have to be willing to, I think, recognize that the threat's growing, and if we aren't willing to answer the threat today, 10 or 15 years from now, it could be something that is just impossible to comprehend how bad this could get.
Rick, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago imagination. Now we hear that the United States is looking into the possibility that the wives of the ISIS figures may play a greater role in operations and communication. I heard today that there actually were some members of the military and the intel community that were surprised at this. Wait a minute. Doesn't this then point to the fact that we just don't have the imagination? We should have the imagination to think ahead of the game here, to think that the wives would be involved, that they might actually have a role here. We're getting caught off guard too often because we don't let ourselves fly a little bit with some imagination in a time of war. Fair to say?
I think that it's not so much as imagination, but obviously ISIS has got an imagination. They've been very willing to adapt their tactics in terms of how we're responding. But I think what's happening is that we're getting intelligence analysis at the bottom level. It's working its way up. But as has been stated in the past, there's been an unwillingness of the administration to be willing to accept the conclusions of the intelligence community because it doesn't fall in line with their philosophical view of how we should be involved in the Middle East and the way that the president wants to, quote, end the U.S. war in Iraq and Afghanistan.
I got about a minute left here. I'm also hearing reports that as far as the Iraqis are concerned, we still don't give them the radios they need. We still don't give them the bullets they need, the guns they need. From what you are hearing, is that the case, that we complain about the Iraqis, yet we're still not arming them the way they need to be ready?
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the big changes that took place in 2011 was that we went from being able to use the Department of Defense funds to get equipment, arms, and supplies to the Iraqis very quickly. And we started to go to normal state-to-state relations where we're operating on State Department processes. The State Department processes and procedures are significantly slower than in the DoD. So one of the lessons learned as we're dealing with Iraq, as we look at Afghanistan, is we can't stop the use of DoD funding to arm, train, and equip our allies, especially when they're in a time of war like they are in both those countries today.
If they are allies and we expect them to get the job done, we have to give them the tools to do it. And just another part of the problem here, and it again comes down to this administration. Rick Brennan, always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
All right, we'll continue to follow this story, of course, because ISIS is on the move, and we have no strategy. Remember those things. Next, the political animal, and why one writer believes the GOP needs to pound sand. You'll find out more when the fastest 60 Minutes in News continues.